All right, Shem and Leah, how are you guys doing today?
I
Yeah.
mean, that's a very tough question right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, Shem, how you feeling?
I'm exhausted. I probably look it, but I'm exhausted. I'm pretty tired. This has been a challenging weekend, I would say. Sort of, our everyday life. This is not something that just sort of sparked up. Aside, I personally lost a relative to the coronavirus or last week.
I'm so sorry.
So this has been
Sorry, Shem.
just between that, I mean, and everything happening, it's been especially challenging.
And I just wanted to start off by saying that as well, that this past week has been incredibly heavy after, just seeing everything that's been unfolding after the death of George Floyd and everything, all the incidents that have led up to that. Mm-hmm. And now you're seeing the public outcries. Now you're seeing what seems to be like the bridging of communities now. And we even had the protest here, the March for Regis. And I went through a ton of different emotions, from feeling extremely sad to feeling confused. And I don't know, it just got me thinking about how did my Black friends and my Black coworkers feel about this? Because I'm going through so many emotions. I wanted to make it very clear that I can feel and I can understand the pain and the frustration of the Black community. However, at the same time, I don't think that I can feel it in the same way that you are and be on that level, because I haven't had to face a lot of the things that the Black community and you guys have had to face. And although I might not be able to connect with you on that same level, I do really think it's important to talk about it, because that's the only way that we can all learn from each other and hear the voices from our community. And I think that as a media publication, it's our responsibility to tell stories and have voices be heard. So I guess I just want to start off by asking, just walk me through and walk us through the different emotions that you guys have been feeling over the past week.
Okay. Well, I could do you one better and talk about how we've been feeling for the past, several years.
Of course.
Only now are we seeing a global reaction to what's happening, but honestly, like Shem said, we're tired, we're exhausted, because we've been stressing this injustice I can only account for myself, since 2012, when Trayvon Martin's death was found, unjustified, and his killer was set free. And we've just been seeing this happen again and again and again, and we're crying out. We've been crying out, and it's really reassuring to see the unity form now. Mm-hmm. But I gotta say, this has been happening for years. I also want to stress that this can't be just a trend or a fad. This needs to be continued, I think. Right. And whatever anybody's following at the time seems to be cut short. Right? This can't be cut short. We need to hear your voices, and they need to last.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't want to become a hashtag. Just gonna put that out there. It's one of my biggest fears, especially over the last little while. I think the events of this past weekend, you've just seen an abundance of frustration. And before I even get into that, I want to thank you, Deepa, for giving us the opportunity to sort of have this conversation and to give us this platform, because I think a lot of us have been struggling with how we sort of talk about this and in what sort of venue we can sort of discuss this. So thank you for that opportunity.
No problem.
This entire last couple days of hearing other people ask me, how I'm feeling about this, and making it very much like a me problem, me as a Black person problem. And I think one thing that we have to do is start to transfer from it being a me problem and it being a we problem, because this is we are society. This is this is a human issue. If you are separating yourself from the events of the last week, then I think that that's part of the problem. We have to stop looking at Black people as one thing and then everybody else is like another thing. I want to feel a lot of hope. I want to see change. I've been angry too, really angry. for a number of reasons. I'm angry that we would not necessarily be talking right now if we didn't see a video of somebody dying, because without a video, it would just be, you know, his word against somebody else's. You know, it makes me angry that there are peaceful protesters who are really working really hard and have been doing this for a long time. Let's just be very clear. This is not something that people have just started this weekend because it's fun to trend. People have been working really hard in communities to really bring about some change. And then, you know, narratives change, whether it's because of violence or looters, and it kind of shifts away from the focus. But I'm also angry that there are a segment of the population that are more upset at things like the looting, which again, let me be super clear before anybody freaks out. I don't agree with looting. I think it's terrible. I think when you destroy somebody's livelihood, that stuff is terrible. My goodness, I want that same energy when a life is taken.
It's
you know,
so crazy.
I want that same passion and that same sort of, you know, just
there should be more energy towards that, Shem.
There really should be more.
A man's life was taken in front of our eyes, and we're upset about other issues now. Yep. And also, I understand what you mean there, that peaceful protest maybe is the right solution, but then again, we've been peacefully protesting as well, right? Yep. I mean, we've seen it from, you know, from the 60s, prior to that even, and we're still in a situation where we're seeing Black men get innocently killed.
What do you think about the media portrayals of what's happening? Is it taking away from the real message of the death of a man?
I think actually this round, usually the media only focuses on the destruction, right? And not really on why the destruction is happening. For some reason, though, right now, for this case, I guess it's just so blatant that there needs to be justice for this man, that I'm actually seeing the media go back to why this all started in the first place, to bring up George Floyd's name again and again.
Firstly, you know, big shout out to the journalists who are covering these protests, who are there really trying to get the facts and trying to get those stories out there, because a lot of them are, in a lot of cases, are risking their lives just to do so. I would say, though, that the media is always going to fetishize violence, right? And always going to fetishize destruction, because that's what's going to bring the eyes and the ears back to their screen. Positive signs coming out of these protests that if you didn't have a Twitter account, you might not see. If you didn't have an Instagram account, you might not see it, because you're not really seeing that. From that perspective, I did want to touch on, you talked about protesting. Colin Kaepernick of the NFL, you know, he was bringing attention, and there are people who criticize his methods. Fine, you know, the people he brought attention to police brutality by kneeling and peacefully, quietly, and it's shocking to me that there are more people upset about him kneeling on a football field than an officer kneeling on somebody's neck and killing them on camera. And I think that that's a very striking sort of none of us here agree with violence, right? None of us want to see people hurt or people die, and none of us want that, any of that stuff. But it's like, you don't want people to, you criticize Colin Kaepernick for protesting quietly. That was not good. You hated that. Now people are protesting a little more angrily, and you hate that as well. So then how are Black people, how are people, DQ people, how's anybody who's feeling disenfranchised supposed to make their voice heard? If you don't like it when it's quiet, you don't like it when it's loud, well, how are we supposed to protest? And I think that needs to be part of the dialogue.
It gets quite frustrating, and we're still there, right? We're still working through it, but right now what's making the difference, I think, is now the world is listening.
My hope is that the world truly listens, because when you really think about it from a factual standpoint, there's not much difference between this George Floyd case than Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland. You know, all these are very similar instances, right? And the world, we thought, you know, we've had protests in Ferguson and in different places in Baltimore. We thought the world listened then, and it didn't happen. You know, whenever we sort of speak up about things like this, you know, there's a criticism that comes with, you know, you're anti-police. You don't like the police, you hate police officers. And I think it's such an unfair criticism, because I'm anti-police brutality.
Right.
But I think everybody should be anti-police brutality.
100%, yeah.
Doesn't make me anti-police. I'm not anti-police. Of course, if something happens to me, I'm calling 911, because there are a lot of brave men and women who are out there doing the line. And I appreciate that more than anything. But I'm anti-police brutality. I'm always going to be anti-police brutality. And guess what? If you're in one of the All Lives Matter crowd, and we can get to that discussion, you should also be anti-police brutality, and that should be, there should be no argument about that.
Can you believe that we're in 2020 and this is the life that Black communities now have to face, of facing all these criticisms of if you speak out about something and, you know, you're now being accused of being anti-police for whatever you have said in the past or now. And like, is that a surprise to you that you're being treated that way? Absolutely or in your mind, has it like always been like this?
It's always been like this. It's always been like this. And nothing has really ever changed. This is a surprise to many others.
I think people are just intellectually lazy. And I'm sorry to cut you, Leah. I think people are just intellectually lazy. I think it's such an easy sort of criticism to come out, but you're not listening. You're not listening to the criticism. You're just saying, oh, you're criticizing, you know, that establishment or that institution. That means you hate all of them. And that's not the case. Yeah. We can't stress that enough.
And you're right. They're being lazy. Why not take a perspective that's not yours and try to understand it from our situation, from our eyes? How could you at all justify these killings or mistreatment of us in any way? Like, I don't understand how you could think that there would be a reasonable excuse for this perspective. Just for once, just give it a try.
I couldn't agree with you, Leah, more. And you know, I also want to address the All Lives Matter crowd, because let's be very clear. All Lives Matter didn't become a thing until people started saying Black Lives Matter, and it's just being used as a racist retort. The statement is Black Lives Matter. It's not only Black Lives Matter. It's basically saying Black Lives Matter too. With police or other authority figures, we're just saying we don't think that we know that not every interaction should end in a death sentence. I shouldn't jog and be killed. I shouldn't get pulled over, you know, for a speeding ticket and then somehow die. I shouldn't be accused of using a fake $20 bill or a forged check and then somehow die.
I shouldn't be walking in Central Park asking you to put your dog on a leash and then be threatened by your own life for the fact, and using white privilege against you, which we also witnessed right before George Floyd was killed.
I've seen this resurgence now online of people using that term, all lives matter, in response to people saying Black Lives Matter. Then people sometimes are like, no, well, all lives matter. So for people who are confused about that, or still stuck in that headset of being like, you know, yeah, I get that, but at the same time, all lives matter. What could you tell them to make them understand that using that is counterproductive to the Black Lives Matter movement?
I mean, we've said it already, Deepa. Like, I don't know how many times we have to say it again. And also, it's kind of self-explanatory. I actually don't want to talk to them. I'm not talking to you. I'm ignoring you. I don't want to hear from you. At this point, you're just antagonizing me. And that's how I feel about it. So I actually don't have anything to say to them about that, because it's explained in the name and it's explained in society as to why we have to say it.
I echo Leah's sentiment. I just think it's laziness, and I think it's willful ignorance. Willful ignorance
And racist. It's racist to say that.
100% racist. It's 100% willfully ignorant to just. My life matters more. I'm saying that in these situations, I want my life to matter as well as yours.
Right.
And you choose to just not hear. You choose to only hear it your way. Well, then I can't have this dialogue with you if you're just refusing to listen.
To dispel any more theories, I think we should also discuss that racism does exist in Canada and it exists in Toronto. You might not see it, but it happens. Because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
And that's kind of what I wanted, that's another topic I wanted to touch on with you guys. Everything is so heavily focused in the States right now, and we understand that they have their own problem, but I also feel that here in Canada, it might not be all that different when you look at it. So, you know, from from your experience, I want to talk a little bit about your experiences, as your experiences being Black Canadians. Do you feel that you have the same rights and the same freedoms as everyone else?
Leah hit the nail on the head. We as Canadians tend to have this very, I think, ignorant view that racism and things like that is something that happens over there to our neighbors to the south. We're not like that. That doesn't happen. Look, we may not have as many high-profile, overt cases of racism, but make no mistake, that stuff happens because it's systemic, right? It is embedded in this nation, and Canada love this country. I don't want anybody telling me to go back to Africa because we're having this conversation, because that's not the racist thing that happens. That always happens. I love this country with my whole heart, but we also have a real history of racism in this country, and prejudice and homophobia and Islamophobia, right? Canada is not perfect in any way, shape, or form. The racism and prejudice that hurts me the most,
the covert one?
The covert racism. Listen, I've been called the N-word, but I can't even tell you how many times in the country. I've been called it online. I've been called it a lot. You know what? There may be people who watch this who want to then throw some stuff at me, whatever, right? That hurts. You want to know what really hurts? It's when you walk into a store, or when you walk into any place of establishment and you get the look, or you get followed, or before I even open my mouth, before I even say anything, it's those.
You know what they're thinking.
You know exactly what's happening. It's the look that somehow, because of this skin that I have, I'm a threat. I'm inherently some sort of threat. I'm a danger to you. And the real scary part is, the more that you look at me as being a danger to you, is the more you're actually endangering me. Potentially, right? And
a word.
And I think that that's something that really needs to be addressed, because it's one of the hardest things for me to walk around. Listen, I'm mindful of what I wear, because I know that if I wear baggy clothes, all of a sudden I'm dressing like a thug, and the things that come with that. It's those sort of it's those very, very, very sort of subtle forms of prejudice and racism that really impact me the most, because you feel it in your bones. You don't have to say it. Nobody has to say anything. You feel it in your bones.
But yeah, Shem hit the nail on the head with that one. I feel the same burning in my neck whenever I go into certain stores that might not want me there, or might not think that I belong there because they perceive that I can't afford it, or that I'm here to make trouble. That's happened throughout my entire life. And just covert comments that you hear day to day, when certain people switch up the tone of how they speak, or the language of how they speak with you compared to how they speak with everybody else, don't think I don't notice.
Right.
And by the way, I don't talk like that, so I don't know why you're talking like that to me. Yo. Why has that got to be in my face?
Yeah.
So just certain subtleties that we go through every single day, I think need to be brought up, and that's why we're bringing it up now.
For sure. And I can even begin to imagine what dealing with that on a daily basis would feel like. I was getting emotional when Shem was talking about it, because I'm just imagining how do you put up with that and know to yourself that you don't have any wrong intentions, but at the same time, everyone thinks that you do because of the color of your skin.
Well, just like Shem's, sorry, Deepa.
No, go ahead.
I was saying, just like Shem said, that he has to be very aware of how he looks and addresses people. That's how we cope. We just have to be very aware with how we say certain things and how it's translated to somebody who might take it offensively. We just have to be careful all the time, because if we're not, and we are vocal about how upsetting it is and how upset we are about it, that could lead us into some trouble.
Do you guys feel afraid to speak out about certain things because of the backlash that you might face, or the things that people might say about you, like, oh my gosh, Shem is an aggressive Black man, or oh my gosh, Leah is an aggressive Black woman? Is that something that you guys deal with and you might want to pour your heart out about stuff like this that is happening, but at the same time you have to pull back because, well, what are people going to say?
Transparent. There was a time in my life where I had a lot of self-hate. I did not like the color of my skin because of the negative reaction I was getting from people, and I hated it. I was mad at my parents for birthing me in this way, and it took quite a bit of I guess it just experience and growing up to recognize I love my black skin, right? I love everything that comes with it. You know, being black is a major part of who I am as a person. But it took a very long time. It took a lot to finally get to that point. I don't feel afraid or scared to speak out. Do I think that that there'll be repercussions? There might be. I mean, there might be people who look at this and they decide to hit unfollow or whatever. I mean, okay, fine, whatever. I mean, it's not that's fine. If you don't want to talk, that's fine. But that tells me more about you than it does about me. If me speaking about things that are impacting me personally offends you in some way, then it's too bad. I also think, you know, the three of us in this conversation have done a very good job of being very clear that this is not hateful speech that we're speaking here, right? We're not sitting here, you know, saying you're this, you're bad, you're this, you're bad, we hate you, yada, yada, yada. We're saying that these are the things that are impacting us. I appreciate you wanting to be an ally or to be supportive. This is how you do it. You just have to listen. Right? And if that offends you, then hey, cool. Like, I'm not going to spend my time or waste my energy trying to convince you otherwise. If you don't want to, that's cool. I'm not begging anybody to, and that's fine. I think these conversations are important. Are they uncomfortable? Sure as hell they're uncomfortable for people. And I get that. You think it's not easy for us either, right? I mean, yes, we're talking about Black people here. Deepa, you're a minority as well, right? I'm sure you have your own struggles and your own things that bother you as well, and there are certain things that sort of frustrate you too. But I don't feel scared to speak up my truth. You know, when you have the truth on your side and you're speaking your truth, you should never feel afraid, and you should always feel confident to speak.
And I think that we're actually in a very unique situation, especially with you two being public figures. The fact that we have even the slightest,
come on,
I don't want to, but it's true. Yeah, the fact that we have a little bit of a platform excites me to actually speak up. Like, I want people to hear what's going on. I think people need to know. There's a lot of ignorant people that might just not be searching for what we're talking about, but if we have the platform to do it and they're able to listen to us and actually maybe try to understand what we're saying here, then we did something. I'm encouraged by it. You're right, Deepa, back in the day I would have been terrified to say anything that was kind of going against the grain. I wanted to fit in. We all want to fit in. We all want to be liked, and we don't want to anger people. And but I can't be complacent. Like, I can't, not in this, especially when it comes to my people. So I'm actually really encouraged that we're able to speak on social media, that we have camera phones, that we're able to record ourselves, speak our truth. I think it's kind of working. I think something's happening here. I think there's a progression here that is in our favor, in humans' favor. And I just want it to keep going, because I don't want this to fall back like all the others.
And I also find it encouraging, and I'm sure, Leah, you can speak to this. I've had a lot of people message a lot of non-Black people specifically have reached out wanting to sort of, how can I learn? How can I understand the situation?
Educate.
And I said earlier, one of the first steps is stop looking at it as a me issue, look at it as a we issue, and then listen. You have to listen. Like, you got to use these ears. Listen, not just to hear. Listen to understand, right? And that is so very important. Encouraging to see that there are a lot of people who normally would probably stay pretty quiet during issues of race and racial strife, are speaking up and they're reaching out to coworker,
Right.
and they're saying, "Hey, I was ignorant before. I don't know
Yes.
I don't know how you're dealing with this or how to handle this. Can you please enlighten me?" I'm always willing. Look, if there's anybody that's watching this, and you're like, "Hey, I don't understand certain things," or I had a question about something that you said or whatever, I encourage you, please just ask, right? Like, we don't be lazy. Don't be, again, intellectually lazy.
I
Ask.
really appreciate the honesty that I'm hearing. The fact that people are admitting their complacency and their ignorance, the fact that they, haven't really been paying attention to the cries of Black people, but now they are. And you know what? Good on you for being honest. I really appreciate it. It's not like I didn't know. I knew. We're watching, right? We can see. And the fact that you're reaching out to say, I want to now make a difference. I want to now be involved. Honestly, it really warms my heart. It really does. Like, just to see the allyship finally. It's nice to see.
It's been happening for years and years and years and years. And like, based off what you guys have been saying, do you somewhat feel a little bit more hopeful from the responses that you've been getting, from the responses that we've been seeing happening, that like finally people understand?
I don't know if they understand just yet. I think they are trying to understand, and they're actually being active about trying to understand, which is, I can applaud you all day for that. Thank you. Yes, I am hopeful for that reason. So I really don't want to be disappointed in the end. But I do think that we have a movement here, and I'm really glad that conversations like this are happening worldwide.
Yeah, I'm admittedly struggling a little bit just because I just find all of this really difficult to handle, and it's very consuming, very all-consuming. And I know that for myself, I have had to make a very concerted effort to kind of not check out, because again, I can't check out of my Black skin, and I'm not looking to ever. But I don't know. I don't know that I'm at the point right now where I can say that I feel better, because I still feel anxious. I still feel exhausted by all of it, quite frankly. But I also don't want to be negative, and I really do hope that unfortunately, in these really difficult circumstances, that there's going to be some light at the end of this tunnel.
I cannot thank you both enough for hopping on here and talking about all this. I can only imagine like how difficult it is, and I think this is a really big step for a lot of people, and I think it's important that these discussions continue, because like I said earlier, I think that's the only way that we can truly learn and understand situations, is by having these conversations and listening and doing our best to understand. So thank you for that. I think I've learned a lot about you two from the things that you told me, a lot of the things that you've had to deal with that, like, again, I have never had to face that. Hopefully this can open up a lot of people's eyes to what's really happening in the world.
Great. One thing before we go, I would just like to refer to people ways to help. For George Floyd, there's a site called justiceforbigfloyd.com where you can sign a petition for the justice of his murder. And also for Regis, there's a GoFundMe that you can donate to the family. I believe it's just gofundme.com/justiceforregis. So if you do want to be active in this, and if you do want to help outside of just posting, this would be a great way to do it.
Awesome. No, that's definitely good to know. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Deepa.